Hi guys, Jasmo here. Iconic boss fights can create some of the most memorable moments you'll ever experience in gaming. They're usually placed at the climax of the story, they reward the player with the best loot, and the more challenging they are, the bigger is the satisfaction from victory. Some games focus heavily on boss fights, and titles such as Bayonetta, Old School Devil May Cry, or Dark Souls became known mostly because of their epic boss battles. In this video, I'd like to focus on a great example that showcases how to design a textbook boss battle, and we're gonna take a closer look at the Innocence fight in Path of Exile. Proper boss fights require a setup, ideally through the story as well as gameplay. In this case, we're asked to kill High Templar Avarius, who resides somewhere in the Chamber of Innocence, but to do that we first have to go through the control blocks, find the boss of that area, Justicor Casticus, and after we kill him pick up the Eyes of Zeal, which will grant us access to the Oriath Square. Oriath is a place that has been referenced since the beginning of the story, but now the player can finally step into it properly, and then making your way through the massive city square, you finally reach the Templar courts, you fight your way through the hordes of strong enemies to reach the Chamber of Innocence, and finally you traverse that zone, killing all Templars on your way to your final destination, the Sanctum of Innocence. This progression gives the player a real sense of anticipation. There is just enough time to commit the player to his mission, but it doesn't take so long that he forgets his main objective. Sanctum of Innocence is a beautiful and very straightforward boss room. It has clearly defined edges, there is no room for confusion, you have some maneuverability, but you cannot completely escape the mechanics of the fight. The stained glass art depicts the story of the sin and innocence, and there is beautiful artwork in the middle of the floor. However, the rest of the floor is in a very neutral dark grey brownish color that serves as a good contrast for the boss and his abilities, making the fight very transparent. And that's the main point that I want to make. The fight is very transparent and not confusing, and this is not an accident, it's just good design. The music and the voice acting are also very appropriate and work together with the visuals to create an atmosphere of a real boss battle. So you finally get to fight High Templar Avarius, and depending on your skill he might be fairly challenging but definitely doable. There are some mechanics of the fight which we will talk about in a moment. However, what I want to focus on first is the surprise factor of what happens when you kill Avarius. Before you wipe the sweat off your forehead, he raises up as Innocence, an old god that has been inhabiting the High Templar, which served as a vessel for what is now a huge and scary golden apparition in front of you. Turns out that the real fight is still ahead of you, and that twist makes it all much more interesting. It's like that moment in Tekken 3 when the ogre picks up the body of Heihachi and turns into true ogre. And to execute something like that in games design wise, you need to make sure that the first encounter was at least a little bit challenging, so that you can try to trick the players into thinking that they've actually completed the challenge, even if it seems a little bit underwhelming. That way they will actually respect and even fear what the hell is going to happen now if the boss battle they just fought was just an appetizer before the real meal. The surprise element is one of the ways of incorporating phases into your boss battles. Adding multiple phases to boss fights allows for so much flexibility. For example, in Path of Exile, the add phases, when the player gets to kill lesser enemies, allow the player to refill his flasks, which are essential for many builds. You can use them to test the fight in different environments, use cutscenes or voice acting for the theatrical effect, and that will amplify the importance of the fight. Players can take in the story much more effectively when they aren't currently trying not to die dodging different boss mechanics. And speaking of mechanics, which most people would consider the crucial part of the boss fight designed, it isn't really important what kind of mechanics are incorporated as much as it is important to make them clear to the player. The Innocence fight utilizes catchphrase cues as well as animation cues in a stellar way. When the High Templar shouts kneel, he performs a ground slam which emits a shockwave. When he shouts burn, he will shoot multiple projectiles at the player in a straight line. When you hear rise, he animates a giant statue to attack you, and I am the Emperor is a cue at the beginning of an ad phase. Once the Innocence rises up to fight you, he will also shout I am the Torch, shooting a massive laser beam that follows you very quickly, requiring you to run sideways, and the closer you are to Innocence, the easier it will be to escape it. I am the end catchphrase, and a massive circle indicates a huge blast that will be the end of your character if you don't get out of it in time. And finally, my favorite of the fight is the bullet hell super projectile projectile. After shouting, "I am your god," Innocence shoots out a yellow ball of projectiles which then split and cover the entire room, and you have to either dodge them or find a statue which you can hide behind to avoid being obliterated by them, because even just one of them can kill you. All of these moves are potentially lethal. They do significant damage, however, the players will have plenty of time to position themselves correctly and avoid them. Because the fight is clear and there is no confusion, no clutter, the fight can be a little bit more difficult, and sometimes it will get hectic when you are low on health and panicking, but that comes from the natural difficulty rather than the overlooked issues of the design, and that's the way it should be. Because when the fight ends, you're going to sigh with relief that it's finally over, and you'll remember it as a part of the game that definitely stood out. And even without great rewards at the end of the Innocence fight, it still has been my favorite encounter in the entire story, and I think it's a great example to study for someone who wants a template for what a good boss battle design should look like. You can take these principles and use them in your own way with your own story and create exciting experience for players. And thank you guys for watching. Let me know in the comments what is your favorite boss battle of all time in terms of design or how epic it was. Thank you for watching and see you next time.